It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us first begin with the headlines. North Korea tests a new rocket engine which it claims is for a geostationary satellite to be used for peaceful purposes, but the rest of the world sees it as a prelude to more missile tests. Korea's southeastern region is struck by the strongest aftershock yet since last week's historic quakes. The tremor caused some property damage, but no one was injured and no nuclear facilities were affected. Lawmakers in Parliament will grill high-level government officials, including cabinet ministers, on issues including defense and reforming the nation's prosecution. Monday's aftershock had a magnitude of 4.5, enough to rattle the entire surrounding province. The tremor caused some property damage, but no one was hurt. The nation's nuclear reactors are operating normally. Kim Mo-kyun has the details on the latest natural disaster.
The earthquake with a magnitude of 4.5 struck near Korea's southeastern city of Gyeongju at 8:33 p.m. Korea time on Monday. The Korea Meteorological Administration said the quake's epicenter was about 11 kilometers from Gyeongju City, which was struck by two powerful earthquakes exactly a week earlier at practically the same time. The agency said the latest quake was an aftershock from last week's 5.8 magnitude earthquake, which was the strongest quake to jolt the country since records began in 1978. Since then, more than 370 aftershocks have been detected, but the latest one is the strongest so far. Fire stations in Daegu and Busan, two cities near Gyeongju, received thousands of quake-related reports on Monday evening, while some residents in Seoul also said they felt the tremor. The Ministry of Public Safety and Security said 11 facility damages were reported, and more than 14,000 calls were made to report the earthquake. However, there were no reports of injuries. The Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Corporation also says all of the country's nuclear reactors are operating as usual. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
And President Park Geun-hye visited the quake-hit southeastern city of Gyeongju. This afternoon, she offered words of comfort to the residents and vowed the government's full support and recovery measures for the region. The president also visited the nearby Walsong nuclear power plant and called for thorough safety checks and disaster prevention measures. North Korea appears to be preparing for yet another provocation, this time a long-range missile launch. The regime state-run media says a new rocket engine has successfully been tested for peaceful purposes, but according to our Kim, it's hard not to view it as a prelude to more missile launches.
As if North Korea's recent nuclear test was not bold enough, the regime now claims to have carried out a successful ground test of a new rocket engine. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said Tuesday that leader Kim Jong-un guided the test of a rocket engine for a new geostationary satellite at the Seohae Space Center in the west of the country. It's Kim's first military-related activity since he oversaw Pyongyang's fifth nuclear test earlier this month. The young leader has identified space development as one of the regime's most pressing tasks and says the North must develop various types of satellites to become a, quote, possessor of geostationary satellites in a couple of years. The North has insisted its satellite launches are for peaceful purposes, but they're widely viewed by the international community as cover for ballistic missile tests. An official from South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the North is believed to have tested a new high-powered engine in preparation for a long-range ballistic missile launch. North Korea observers in Seoul agree. They see the test as a follow-up measure after the North launched a long-range missile in February, indicating the North could test the missile soon.
The rocket engine test from North Korea shows that the regime could launch an intercontinental ballistic missile sometime around the October 10th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Workers' Party or the upcoming U.S. presidential election in November.
Most military experts in Seoul also say it would take at least hundreds more rocket engine tests before it could successfully launch a geostationary satellite. But the fact that Kim Jong-un tested a new rocket engine so suddenly shows that the North wants to increase more pressure on Seoul and Washington. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Perhaps to speak the only language that North Korea seems to understand, Washington reportedly plans to dispatch B-52 Stratofortress from Guam as a further warning to Pyongyang to stop its provocative acts. Kim Hyun-bin fills us in on the follow-up to last week's B-1B bomber's appearance in the peninsula.
The U.S. could deploy 2 B-52 bombers to its Osan air base just south of Seoul this week, as a show of force in response to the regime's latest nuclear test. Military sources say the U.S. is looking into the possibility of landing the bombers at Osan, which would mark the first time a U.S. strategic bomber has touched down on the peninsula. Washington has previously dispatched B-52 bombers to Korea, for example, after the North's fourth nuclear test in February, but those were only flyovers. The sources added that there is the additional possibility that the bombers could be stationed at the base for a few days. The B-52 has an airborne range of up to 16,000 kilometers and can carry 31 tons of explosives. That puts Pyongyang within range of a single round-trip mission. The bombers are also equipped with bunker-buster bombs that could demolish enemy facilities underground. Washington also plans to send a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan, to the peninsula early next month for a joint naval exercise with South Korea. Kim Hyun-bin, Aria News.
Washington and Beijing are reportedly co-investigating a Chinese conglomerate that's suspected of aiding North Korea's nuclear weapons program. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Chinese police recently launched an investigation into the finances of Hongxiang Group, which may be ignoring the heavy international sanctions on the Hermit Kingdom. The report says this marks the, quote, most serious effort so far to pursue Chinese companies thought to be helping Kim Jong-un's regime. The mid-sized manufacturing firm near the China-North Korea border in Liaoning province was also mentioned in a South Korea-U.S. study that analyzed the supply chains that make Pyongyang's weapons development possible. The study suggests imposing secondary sanctions on Chinese firms that trade with the North would make existing sanctions more effective. Or at the South Korean National Assembly, a 4-day interpellation session got started today. Several high-level government officials facing questions on domestic political issues. For details, let's turn to our Park Ji-won.
Around a dozen lawmakers from Korea's 3 main political parties grilled high-profile government officials at Parliament on Tuesday. The list of officials in the hot seat included Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won, as well as the Ministers of Justice, Public Safety, and Interior. Lawmakers focused their attention on the government's approach to addressing the nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. The controversy surrounding the U.S. missile defense system THAAD was also a key topic.
Some politicians argued that North Korea would not have conducted nuclear tests if the Sunshine Policy had continued and the decision to deploy THAAD hadn't been made. But even in 2006, when the Sunshine Policy was in place, when there was no mention of THAAD, North Korea conducted a nuclear test.
North Korea has long continued its reckless development of nuclear weapons. The THAAD deployment is an inevitable decision by the government to protect the people from the North.
On another front, opposition lawmakers urged the government to set up a new body to investigate corruption cases involving high-profile officials, drawing the objections of the Prime Minister.
It's now been over 10 years since we started discussing setting up the investigative body. We can no longer rely on the prosecution to perform itself.
We know prosecutors are having problems with self-reform. We currently have a special prosecutor system, and I think we should use it instead of creating a new investigative body.
Lawmakers also touched on a range of other issues, including a proposal to revise the constitution and the government's crisis management capability amid the recent earthquakes that jolted the southeastern part of the country. The next session on Wednesday will focus on national security and foreign affairs, while the economy will be the main topic on Thursday, and educational and social issues will top the agenda on Friday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's political parties are split on whether to lend a helping hand to the heavily sanctioned communist state up north. This comes after Pyongyang made a rare appeal for flood relief last week, after hundreds were killed or missing earlier this month. For more on this dilemma, we turn to our Ji Myung-gil.
The ruling Saenuri Party said Tuesday it is reluctant to provide aid to North Korea, especially in light of its recent provocations.
The recent fifth nuclear test, the SLBM launch, and today's test of a new rocket engine must all stop. The international community can only help when North Korea ends its nuclear and missile provocations.
The severe flooding that hit the northeastern part of the country earlier this month has resulted in some 500 deaths and affected an estimated 100,000 residents. The North Korean media had previously said it was experiencing the worst downpour and strongest wind since 1945. In light of that, South Korea's opposition parties once again called on their government to provide humanitarian aid to the north.
Surplus rice should be sent as food aid to flood-affected areas in the north. If necessary, we can exchange our rice with North Korean crops like corn.
South Korea had a bumper harvest of rice last year, pushing prices down, and this year's output is expected to be similar. The minor opposition People's Party agreed with the Minju Party, saying South Korea could reduce its rice surplus by donating it to the north, which is said would promote a more peaceful mood on the peninsula. 김영길, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's shift our focus to the crisis in Lotte Group. It was the conglomerate's chairman Shin Dong-bin's turn on Tuesday to be grilled by prosecutors. Shin Se-min gives us a closer look at the ongoing corruption investigation.
The head of Korea's fifth largest conglomerate, Lotte Group, appeared before prosecutors Tuesday morning for questioning in a widening investigation into corruption at Lotte. He's the first chairman to have been subjected to questioning by the prosecution in Lotte's history. Shin is suspected in a litany of alleged misdeeds, shady deals made in M&As, selling the assets below market prices, embezzlement, and breach of trust. Standing before a flock of reporters, Shin declined to comment on the allegations.
I apologize for all the concern I have caused. I will sincerely cooperate with the prosecution's investigation.
Prosecutors are investigating whether Shin accepted nearly $8.9 million in unearned yearly stipend. They will also look into his alleged involvement in slush funds worth over $26 million siphoned off the group's construction arm over the past 10 years. Prosecutors have questioned other Lotte Group executives suspected of involvement in the massive corruption scandal. Earlier this month, Lotte's elderly founder Shin Gyuk-ho and his elder son Shin Dong-ju were questioned. The widening probe has also extended to the founder's common-law wife Seo Mi-kyung, who lives in Japan and has so far not cooperated. The prosecution, working with other agencies, has seized all her property, charged her with additional tax, and canceled her passport. Seo is believed to own 5 properties in Korea worth roughly $94 million. Shin Se-min, 아리랑 뉴스.
Turning to the race for the White House now, the first televised debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump will take place less than a week from now. Our Kim Jong-soo breaks down this highly anticipated event for us.
Rio, the 22-year-old had a promising start, but failed to medal, and she missed 3 tournaments this season due to an injury. Chung says, however, that she was inspired by her teammates, and that the Olympics experience only made her stronger.
I felt crushed after the Olympics, but I definitely learned a lot from watching Park Hit-bi's performance up close. I had faith in myself, so shortly after I decided to turn my own disappointment into positive energy so that I can do better at future events.
It's one competition after another for the busy champion. She can't get too comfortable at home. After just a few days of rest, she will go to Japan for the Women's Open Championship starting next Thursday. Yun-shin, 아리랑 뉴스.
That concludes our newscast for this hour. As always, thank you for watching.